Tonight became a shape I could hold and not swallow. It sat on the counter beside the paper crane, sharp at the edges, humming. The apartment inhaled with me and exhaled without me. Every clock sounded like footfalls that never reached the door. I cleaned the sink, organized the spice jar labeled "not cumin," drafted sentences I would never say. "You asked for tonight, Dave." I answered yes like a vow. Outside, the city stitched a seam of light. Inside, the kettle rehearsed boiling, then stalled. His text arrived like weather. "Running late. Be home after midnight. I'll wait still." Midnight held its breath. The fridge hummed a small apology, the radiator clicked like knitting needles, and my phone lay on the table wearing the message like a scarf. "I'll wait still." Every shadow remembered his shape. I washed the one mug again, because I wanted the rim to be clean when his mouth found it. When footsteps finally climbed our stairs, my chest stood up before I did. The key slid, the lock turned, and Dave stepped in with rain on his shoulders, hair flattened, eyes shining with exhaustion, and something else that kept refusing to name itself tonight. "Sorry," he said, without putting his bag down first. The word collapsed between us, tired and sincere. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded, then shook his head, a yes that had swallowed a no. "Come sit," I said. The kettle obliged with a stage whisper, eager drama. He peeled off the hoodie, revealing a t-shirt with a faded constellation, and sank into his chair like gravity had opinions. I set the mug between us, two handles facing inward. He watched my hands as if they could translate him. "I can't keep missing the mark," he whispered, throat tight tonight. He reached for the crane, straightened a wing. I kept thinking I could. "Keep things neat," he said, voice rough like gravel in a jar. "Work, rent, sleep, jokes about the kettle. You on your side of the couch, me on mine." But the lines smudged. "You make me want to ruin the chart." I waited. He rubbed the bandage I'd wrapped, a nervous orbit. "Liam is my ex," he said, watching my reaction like a weather report. "We broke up a year ago. He knows me, sometimes better than I want." He told me to tell you the truth. "The truth is I haven't been straight with you," he said, mouth twitching at the accidental pun. "I'm bi, Alex. Have been since before I knew the word. I'm out at work, kind of, but at home I kept it filed under later, and I can't keep pretending you're just my roommate." His fingers tapped the table, a soft code. "I like you, Alex. More than I planned, more than is easy. If it scares you, I'll fold it smaller, keep it quiet, find somewhere to put it that doesn't knock things over. But I can't lie to you anymore." My breath remembered how to be warm. I wanted to launch into orbit and also sit perfectly still forever. "I've been building a museum of not saying," I admitted. "Exhibits include your laugh, how you leave notes on the fridge like fortune cookies, the way you hum when you're concentrating. I didn't plan this either. But I like you. Truly." The words felt like stepping into sunlight. "You're not sure belongs to you." Dave exhaled, shoulders lowering like a drawbridge. He smiled, startled and soft, a new weather moving in. We both looked at the mug as if it might clap. We leaned in, then stopped, two birds negotiating a wire. "Can I?" he asked. Not to kiss. He took my wrist, pressed his mouth to skin, a promise I could count. "There's more," he said. "I applied for a fellowship in Seattle. They offered it." "Are you going?" I asked. "I don't know. Not if staying is honest. Not if leaving is fear in a lab coat. I had to tell you first." We sat with the question. "We don't. Have to decide tonight," he said. "Breakfast tomorrow, a walk, no running." He kissed my forehead, showered. His phone lit. Decide. Morning tasted like a decision, metallic at the back of my tongue, sweet only if I pretended. The word from last night, decide, still lit the inside of my skull like a hallway light left on. We had promised a walk, breakfast, no running. Brewed courage with the coffee and tried to drink both without choking. Outside, the city stretched, spine cracking, storms rinsed away. Inside, the paper crane watched from the counter like it knew the difference between flight and escape. By sunset, we would name something: love, fear, Seattle, home. The day pretended to be ordinary. We did not. We kept the promise to start with breakfast. Dave's hair stuck up like punctuation, his laugh careful at first, then a little bolder. He burned the edges of the toast and called it caramelized. I rolled my eyes and made a show of scraping the dark off with a butter knife. It felt like building a small raft: eggs, coffee, jam, and pushing it onto water we both knew could drown and carry us in the same breath. He pressed 2 fingers into his bandage and smiled when it didn't complain. We walked down to the market and let noise do some of the talking. A flower vendor argued with a wind gust. A kid ran past with a lemon-like treasure. The air smelled like oranges and bus brakes. Dave's wrist brushed mine and neither of us apologized for the accident. When he stopped at a stall selling honey, he said, "Seattle has rain like this, but colder. It starts in the bones and then the sky catches up." I asked, "How long is the fellowship?" He said, "A year." He did not say, "Please ask me to stay." We cut through the park where the grass always looked like it was mid-sentence. On a bench we sat so close our coats negotiated a truce. I told him the truth as poorly as I could. I'm afraid of ruining good things, of turning a home into a fault line, of choosing wrong and finding out by echo. He nodded like he knew that language by heart. "I'm afraid of leaving you and calling it ambition," he said, "or staying and calling it fear. The decision, date is today, 5 o'clock. The word today tilted the whole afternoon. He looked at my mouth and then away. "I'm not going to kiss you only to fly 3 time zones west," he said, smiling without looking sure of it. Then he did anyway, the gentlest correction I've ever been given. It was brief, a pressed leaf, and it warmed parts of me I didn't know had wintered. He pulled back and we both laughed, not at the kiss but at the relief of hearing the sound of us not breaking. A dog barked once as if to witness. The wind rearranged nothing. We walked home with a baguette we hadn't meant to buy and a jar of honey we definitely had. The apartment took us in, the kettle clucking its sympathy like an old aunt. Dave yawned and massaged the bridge of his nose. "Nap," I ordered, the way he orders me to eat on bad deadline days. He didn't protest. He curled on the couch like a comma. I slid a blanket over him and pretended that made me a sentence. The crane's paper wing cast a bent shadow across his cheek, like a blessing trying to be precise. I opened my laptop and watched the cursor blink like a patient pulse. Work pretended to be important. My inbox did not. A new email hovered from the fellowship coordinator. "Final reminder. Offer expires at 5 p.m. PT. My chest did small math. That meant 8 our time. Panic loosened its tie. We had hours. We had only hours. I set an alarm for 7:30 and placed my phone face down as if that could stop time from looking back at us. Dave murmured something in sleep. My name, then a half word like "stay or today," I couldn't tell. The radiator clicked soft applause. I was deciding whether to wake him for tea when someone knocked, not the neighbor's bored knuckles. 3 careful taps, like a question rehearsed. Dave's phone lit up on the table where he'd dropped it. Liam. The second knock arrived with my name spoken through the door, low and unfamiliar. "Alex? Hey, He cleared his throat. "Liam. We need to talk." 3 knocks braided the afternoon into a rope I suddenly had to climb. Dave slept on the couch, mouth parted, a comma dreaming its sentence. The paper crane watched from the counter. The honey jar caught a square of light like a held breath. Through the door, a stranger used my name as if practicing it. "Alex? It's Liam. We need to talk." Seattle pressed its shoulder against our threshold. The kettle held its tongue. My alarm would not ring for hours, but decision had found the room. I touched the doorknob and thought, if love knocks, so do ghosts. I slid the chain back. Liam was windblown and careful, denim jacket damp at the shoulders, a man who had learned to enter rooms without tipping the furniture. His eyes met mine with a kind of practiced gentleness that made it easier to breathe and harder to trust. "I'm not here to start a fire," he said, low. I texted. He didn't answer. I figured that meant he was either napping or hiding. Both, I said, glancing at the couch. Dave's lashes fluttered, but sleep held. You can come in, but quiet. Liam stepped onto the mat and stayed there, as if crossing further might be an invasion. He noticed the paper crane, the bandage scissors on the table, the 2 mugs. He's been carrying that much? He asked, half to himself. More, I said before I could choose discretion. Then, because it was my turn to be careful, why are you here? Because he asked me months ago to keep him honest, Liam said. He does this thing, shrinks himself to fit other people's comfort. He'll tell himself he's choosing safety when he's actually choosing fear. I used to confuse that with loyalty. I shouldn't have. Jealousy pricked and then withdrew, understanding its place. Are you trying to get him to go? I asked. I'm trying to get him to choose, he said. If staying with you is his courage, I'll clap from the curb. If Seattle is, I'll clap from farther away. But I won't watch him ghost his own life. We stood with it. Somewhere upstairs, a blender whirred. The radiator clicked like restrained applause. He told me about you, I said. Not everything. Enough to know you're not a villain. Not a hero either, he said, mouth slanting. We broke because I kept asking him to meet me in a room I'd locked from the inside. I wanted certainty he couldn't give. I want better for him now. A rustle from the couch. Dave sat up, hair pointing in 3 directions, eyes squinting, first at me, then at the doorway. Liam? I knocked, Liam said, palms shone, guilty of nothing but timing. You weren't supposed to, Dave replied, and then softened. And you were because I asked you to do exactly this if I started stalling. His gaze found mine and stayed there. I didn't want you to meet like this, he said. Then I guess we'll rewrite it, I said, attempting a smile that felt steadier than I was. We were talking. I was listening, Liam corrected gently. And I'll leave if you want. Dave stood, blanket sliding to the floor. He moved to my side like a decision made by feet first. Stay for 5 minutes, he told Liam. Long enough to say the thing you came to say. Then go. Liam nodded. Okay. The thing is, you applied for Seattle for a reason that had nothing to do with running away. You light up when you talk about it. Don't turn that light off because the room is unfamiliar. And don't make Alex your excuse to dim. If he's your person, he won't ask you to shrink. He looked at me, waiting for me to disagree. I didn't. My throat found words. I don't want to be the reason you don't go, I told Dave. I also don't want distance to be the reason we pretend this meant less than it does. Dave's hand found mine, settled. I want both, he said simply. I want you. I want Seattle. I'm afraid that's greedy. Or honest, Liam said, soft approval in it. Make a plan and call it love. We did, right there on our tired rug, Sunday video breakfast with pancakes and the same jar of honey, his in Seattle and mine here. Nightly check-ins, even if only to share the worst joke from the day. Plane tickets booked before the first week starts. Me visiting in month 1, him back here in month 2. And a small glass jar on the counter for notes we'd write each morning, a sentence, a scent, a color, so when we see each other we can tip our days back into the same bowl. Liam exhaled like a knot coming loose. Good, he said. Now I can go. He tapped the doorframe twice, a habit I suspected Dave once teased him for, and slipped out. Silence. Then the kettle, relieved, began to mutter. Dave turned to me, eyes wet but unafraid. I don't want to lose the ordinary you, he said. Won't, I answered. We'll store it, like leftovers. It'll taste different, not worse. His phone rang, the hospital's tone a tidy urgency. He listened, nodded, short-staffed again. I have to go, he said, apology and resolve threaded. Then we decide by phone, I said. I pressed my mouth to his, not a question this time. He tasted like sleep and future. At 7:52, Sirens stitched the street. At 7:54, the alarm trembled. On the counter. At 7:56, my email refreshed. The fellowship subject line, a small son. At 7:58, my screen lit with his name. "I've got 2 minutes," Dave said over the hum of a corridor. "I can't open the portal from here. I trust you." To click? My finger hovered. "To choose," he said. The intercom crackled. The line hissed. "Alex." The call dropped. The clock turned 7:59. The paper crane tilted its head, waiting. The call died at 7:59, leaving my name ringing like a dial tone. The fellowship email glowed, a sun asking for worship. The paper crane leaned toward the screen. The kettle clicked as if counting down. If I said yes, I chose sky and distance. If I said no, I chose walls and a future I might shadow. Dave had said, "I trust you," and hallway swallowed the rest. The cursor blinked, patient. I wished for an oracle and found only my own pulse, an answer knocking from the inside. I lifted my hand and chose the sound of us. At 80, the page asked one last time, "Accept offer?" My finger hovered, then landed. The site thought about it like it needed to check with the weather. The little circles spun, polite and merciless, and then turned into a green check mark that lit my face the way a yes lights a life. An email arrived like rain starting, "Congratulations." I exhaled a breath I'd been holding since he said Seattle out loud. The apartment felt the new shape of our future and rearranged nothing. The kettle, relieved, finally boiled. I texted him a photo of the acceptance screen and typed, "We chose yes." The autocorrect tried to make it. "We chose yesterday, but I left it because it felt like both." I set 2 mugs down and labeled the empty glass jar on the counter with a torn piece of masking tape. "Us, daily." First note, written on the back of a grocery receipt. "Today tasted like honey and fear and I swallowed both." I folded the receipt into a tight square, dropped it in, and heard the smallest celebration. My phone rang from a quiet corner. "Supply closet," Dave whispered, and I could hear the hallway pulse of hospital life just beyond him. "Tell me." I clicked, I said, voice steadier than I expected. "We chose the sky and the kitchen table. Both." The noise he made lived somewhere between laughter and relief. "Good," he said, and I could feel his forehead press in imagination to the inside of his wrist. "I wanted that. I didn't want to ask because I wanted you to own it too." "Liam said to make a plan and call it love," I added. "I'm calling it that," he said. "I wish I could kiss you right now." "You will," I promised. Later, and then again. The countdown began without a drum roll. We measured days and shared lists on the fridge. Cancel the internet, buy a second charger, find a subletter, thaw the soup we keep meaning to eat. We tested time zones by calling each other from opposite corners of the apartment, Dave in the bedroom whispering good morning, while I stood in the kitchen and said good night. It was ridiculous and exactly right. He taught me how to fold a paper crane. Mine looked like a determined moth. He kept it anyway. Liam texted me, "Clap from the curb achieved. Proud of you both." I held no grudge at the knock that hurried us toward honesty. Dave tapped the doorframe twice when he left the apartment, a new habit replacing an old one. I tapped back. On the last morning, we made pancakes that did not burn and ate them cross-legged on the floor because chairs felt too formal for a temporary goodbye. We read aloud from the jar. His note: "Your laugh when the baguette betrayed us on the way home, scattering crumbs like confetti." Mine: "The way you say nap like a commandment." We tucked the jar into a cabinet to wait for our first reunion. At the airport, the air tasted like citrus and recycled sorrow. Seattle lived in the departures board in clean letters. Dave's hand found mine and didn't fidget. "I'm not choosing away from you," he said. "I'm choosing toward us from farther." "Distance is a measurement," I answered, "not a verdict." At the gate, we practiced not making promises we couldn't keep and then made them anyway. Weekly Sunday breakfasts, nightly check-ins, the jar. No shrinking. We kissed, soft, then certain. He pressed the original paper crane into my palm. "For your end of the string," he said. He took my moth. "For mine." The plane took him and didn't take anything else. I went home to an apartment that felt like a held note. The kettle learned the new math of mornings without him and evenings with his face on my phone, pixels warm as skin. On our first Sunday apart, we made pancakes at the same time and ate together in 2 kitchens. He showed me Seattle rain scribbling the window. I showed him our radiator's applause. We laughed, and it sounded like a room I'd always wanted to live in. Some nights were heavy, some were easy. We put them both in the jar. The cranes kept their vigil, wings patient. When his first month was done, he came back and tapped the doorframe twice. I met his hand with mine. Home shifted to make room and didn't complain. I saw my roommate and I loved it, then I saw my person and I kept choosing. We still do. I did not plan to fall for the man who left coffee rings on my textbooks and sang off key in our kitchen. I did not plan to memorize the tilt of his laughter or the way his shoulders loosened when he thought no one watched. But plans evaporate when a single glance burns a map. The night I truly saw Dave, the city lights echoed inside our apartment, and something unnameable crossed the room and settled in me. Love did not knock. It slipped a key into my chest, turned, and whispered, "Ready or not, here I am now. My name is Alex, 24, renter of apartment 4B, worshipper of coffee and deadlines. The building is old brick and thin walls. The stairwell smells permanently like rain." Dave arrived with a battered guitar case, a box labeled spices, and a smile that made the wait seem optional. 25 hospital nights, a thank you that lived in his eyes. I noticed his careful kindness before I noticed the curve of his mouth. It all landed at once anyway. We split rent, swapped chore charts, and told ourselves responsible stories, the kind that keep hearts in their lanes and hands occupied. Days blurred into a choreography of ordinary grace. Dave tucked blue scrubs into our tiny washer, left coffee, rings like moons on my textbooks, and sang off key when he thought the shower swallowed him. He apologized for everything, then forgot to be sorry and laughed. I learned his calendar without asking. Tuesdays meant ramen with extra egg. Fridays meant a late shift and quieter footsteps. I kept my attention folded into corners. His sanitizer cracked, knuckles, the stubborn nick on his jaw, the patience with our temperamental kettle. Domestic altars, each one lit with a flame I refused to name. The night everything tilted, rain scribbled blue across the city, and a transformer popped like a distant firework. Our apartment exhaled into candlelight. Dave arrived soaked, hair pasted to his forehead, hoodie clinging like tied to shore, and for once the hospital let him go early. We ate toast because the stove sulked, the butter refusing to soften. He told me a patient had folded him a paper crane for luck. I told him deadlines were paper cranes with teeth. He laughed, then went quiet, like someone turned the volume down on his heart, and the rest of him obeyed. He rubbed his wrist. A bruise wrapped it like a cloud, refusing to move on. I asked before I could stop myself. "Supply cart," he said, shrugging my concern off with his hoodie. Worry impersonates closeness so convincingly. I brewed tea as an apology, the kettle taking. Its time, every bubble sounding like a thought I would not say. We shared one mug because dishwashing had become myth. His mouth met the porcelain where mine had been. It was nothing. It was everything. I wrote a map of that small geography in my head and then pretended to lose it. After midnight, thunder thinned. Dave stood at the window, the city smeared into watercolor. He thought I had fallen asleep. He spoke to the glass, to the rain, to anyone but me. "I cannot keep pretending," he said, and the room took the words like a fragile box. I sat up without meaning to, breath snagging on the edge of that sentence. He didn't turn. In the reflection, his face looked like a man deciding to become someone braver. He pinched the candle out and said goodnight, voice gentle and far away, as if he'd left part of it outside. In the dark, I lay counting breaths that weren't mine. Lightning traced the walls like handwriting. A neighbor laughed in their sleep. I rose to rinse the mug, telling myself I was only chasing calm. Dave's phone buzzed on the counter, face up, a small rectangle of borrowed daylight. I did not touch it. I did not need to. The message hovered plain as a street sign. Are you going to tell Alex? My name burned there, bright as a warning or an invitation. Somewhere inside me, floorboards shifted, a door I had kept bolted, clicking softly toward open wide. I wasn't supposed to see Dave's screen, but the glow branded my name into me. Morning came with silence folded into the corners of our kitchen, and questions crowded the toast. Are you going to tell Alex? Tell me what? Good news, goodbye, or the kind of confession that rearranges furniture and futures? He moved around me, careful, like I was a sleeping cat or a loaded thought. I carried the message between ribs like a secret spark. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I didn't. Either way, my heartbeat learned a new clock, and every tick sounded like his voice inside. Morning arrived like it had forgotten how to be bright. Dave stood at the stove in those wrinkled gray sweatpants that many hadn't slept well, flipping pancakes with the focus usually reserved for crises. I said morning. He said it back like it was a safe password and not a wish. We moved around each other, choreography memorized, new hesitations added. He reached for the mug I'd dried, and I reached too, fingers grazing the back of his hand. His skin was warm, a detail that felt like a secret. He didn't pull away. The kettle screamed. We pretended it needed us more than we needed courage. I made coffee because pretending is easiest when it involves routine. Dave slid a pancake onto my plate. He'd shaped it into something almost like a heart, and then covered the implication, with blueberries, a blue apology. You eat, he said, pointing his spatula at me, and I understood it was his way of saying, please stay, even if my words are knots. He rubbed the bruise on his wrist without noticing. I noticed for both of us. Let me wrap that, I said, not waiting for permission. The first aid kit was a shoebox that used to house sneakers he insists were never ugly. I sat him at the table, turned his palm toward light, and wound the gauze, carefully, like a thought I didn't want to startle. His breath changed, shallower, steadier. I asked if it hurt. He said, only when I forget to be careful. I said, about your wrist? He smiled at the table. His phone buzzed. The screen lit with a name, Liam. The preview field offered a single line before modesty dimmed it again. Call me when you can. He deserves honesty. The bandage in my hand tightened of its own accord. He doesn't look at the screen, I told myself. He won't. Dave blinked and then reached for it, thumb hovering, not quite touching. He put the phone face down and patted the gauze. There, he said. Good as new. We ate. The pancakes were too sweet, and I finished them anyway. He told me about a patient who had thanked him for holding their hand through a scan, and somehow it sounded like he was telling me about himself. I wanted to ask if he was okay. I wanted to ask who Liam was. I asked if we needed more dish soap. After the plates, he carried the trash out, and in the pause, the apartment sighed into its ordinary bones. On the counter, between the salt and the paper crane now perched like stubborn hope, his phone hummed again. Dave returned with damp hair and a different expression, the one that means decision. Can we talk tonight? He asked. The question felt like the floor opening into sky. Yes, I said, immediately, too quickly. His smile reached one corner of his mouth and then stopped, as if the rest of his face needed time to catch up. He tucked something into my palm. The paper crane softened at the wings from being carried. For you, he said. For luck. The city outside had resumed its breathing. Traffic stitched the morning together. The kettle, as if jealous, clicked in the quiet. The hospital called at 10. Need you, short on nights? Can you come early? Dave listened, eyes far away, then said, Of course. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize me. Tonight, he promised. Tonight, I echoed, like it was a password. After he left, the apartment felt like an unanswered question.